Hello and welcome. I am Mix It Light and this is my podcast. Today I have a very special guest. Please say hello to Jory. Hello, Jory.
Hello, everybody.
I'm excited to have you here, Jory.
Yeah, it's been a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, a long time, probably over a year.
Yeah, I think the last time I did a podcast was the reunion thing last October with the Bible Witness.
Oh, yeah, that's it. We did do that one. Yeah. Um, okay, so what we're doing today is that we're going to talk about the documentary Missing 411 The Hunted. Is that right?
Yes.
And for those who don't know, the Missing 411 series of documentaries and books are written by David Paulides. Paulides. Am I saying this wrong? Paulides, right?
Yes.
Okay, so before we start, I'm going to say if you guys would please give this video a thumbs up, I'd appreciate it. If you are not subscribed and you would like to be, please go ahead and click that button. And if you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, go ahead and click that bell and make your choice for how often you'd like to be notified. Also, there will be a link below for donations for the channel. Most of my stuff is not monetized. They don't think that my topics are appropriate for advertisers. I don't know why. And Rob and I are saving up money because Rob and I want to go on a road trip of the East Coast in the New England area and film all the haunted, very haunted spots and show them to you and bring you along. Also, I have new merchandise, and I'll put the link for my new merchandise below. And if you'd like to check that out, that would be awesome too. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with in general, what the missing 411 cases all have in common that makes these cases in particular 411 cases. So there's always a point of separation. Most okay, I'm not gonna say always because most times if you go out with more than one person, that's how it happens. There's a point of separation. So you and your two buddies go out, you're gonna go hunting, and what's that noise?
That would be my big giant dog refreshing himself.
Okay, so that would be you, two of your buddies go out on a camping trip or a hunting trip, and one of you is not thinking correctly and says, I'll stay here. You go ahead, or I'll go ahead, you stay here. There's always a separation of a group if you go out in a group. Also, the time of disappearance. Most disappearances happen in the late afternoon, early evening. Boulder fields. Many times disappearances happen around boulder fields, which makes it extremely hard to perform a search for a missing person. And the next one would be near water. So in general, this type of water tends to be a river or a creek. And I'm sorry. I'm doing this with my kids in the house, your siblings in the house, and one of them is trying to wave me down. Um, no, it's fine. Okay, sorry. Um, there is almost always a weather event that stops the search party. All of a sudden, there's 2 feet of snow. A horrible rainstorm comes in and washes away all the clues. Or the footprints. You know, those kind of those kind of events, flooding, are often associated with these missing person cases. Sometimes the person has a disability or an illness. In the first case we're going to talk about, the man was missing an eye. Things like that. One of the cases we're going to talk about, the man had injured a knee. Nothing drastic, but I'm not talking about anything, these people aren't going out on their deathbed. Just there's something maybe that keeps them and causes that point of separation. I can't really walk, my knee's hurting, you guys go ahead. Something like that. Correct, Joy?
Yeah, I think every case we talk about, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It's just there's something in a way that is wrong with you, but not like severely wrong with you. It's just a minor detail.
Yeah. Something that keeps you away from or has you separate away from the group. Dogs can't track you. For some reason, the dogs can't track you, or they can track you to where your last known position was, but it doesn't track any further, or it tracks and it stops in the middle of nowhere, and they can't track any further. Or sometimes they can't track you at all. Or the weather comes in, and of course, in those cases, the dogs can't track you either. A lot of these cases, the bodies or maybe possessions of the person are found in the exact spot where people have been looking for, like the searches usually last about 5 to 10 days, but there are hundreds of people searching, helicopters, dogs, Parks and Recs, you name it, they're out there searching. And a year later, the body's in the middle of the trail. That happened recently in the park in Jory. Wow, this is the park that we used to drive by to go to Disneyland. The national park. It is
the national park we used to drive by to go to Disneyland.
Yeah, we didn't realize it at the time. Anyway, it's. I'm sorry. It's very desert. It's very famous for their missing people. A man went missing. He was only supposed to be on a short hike. They searched everywhere. The trail was completely easy to follow, completely visible because it was the desert. There were like little bushes and things, but nothing where you couldn't find a person if they had been hurt. They found his body sitting 4 feet from the trail a year later, 2 years later, something. Just sitting there. It was his backpack hadn't been gotten into. No animals had attacked him. He still had water, and there he was, dead, of course. And that happens a lot. That the bodies will show up where people have walked right through. In one of these cases we're going to talk about, not only did they walk through, but they did the spider search where they take string and they go through to make sure they know where everybody have gone, and they go in grids and spread the string out up and down, and then sideways and then across. And there was nothing. If they are found, they are missing clothing. That usually tends to be their shoes. For some reason, when children go missing, and if they are found, their clothing tends to be inside out, put on incorrectly. Or in one case that I recently did, the boy's shoes were off, his socks were in his pockets, his shoes were put back on, neatly tied. He didn't know how to tie his shoes. And oftentimes there's an unknown cause of death. They're just dead. There's no visible reason for them to be dead, so they often write it off as weather related. It was cold. And geographical clusters. There are places throughout the country. Washington State is well known for this, for having geological clusters where 3 people, 5 people, 10 people in one area will go disappearing over a certain amount of time. What we're going to talk about is New Mexico. In one area, we're going to talk about where 15 people went missing over, I think it was an 11-year period. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that about the things they have in common, Jory?
I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. Now, it's not limited to a certain sex. Women aren't taken more often than men. And children go missing. It seems to be across the board that there's no preferential treatment. So, do you want to start? Let's start with the first one, Tom Messick.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tom Messick went disappeared. He went missing in 2015 in Albany, New York. And do you remember this story, Jory?
Yeah, him and his wife owned property out in the woods also. Mm-hmm. And he was very outdoorsy with his sons. He taught them how to fish. He taught them how to hunt. He was a former military man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how this was the gentleman you mentioned earlier that didn't have his eye anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He lost it in a accidental explosion.
Yes.
While he was in the service. But he was a very avid woodsman. And they owned property by a lake, correct?
By Lily Pond, which is.
But the pond itself was also by a lake.
Yeah, which I was gonna say is actually very large, and there's also a lake. Yes.
Yeah.
They owned a cabin with 4 other families that they would go on vacation with every year.
Mm-hmm.
So him, his 2 sons, and a friend went to go hunting. It was in the afternoon.
He had 2 friends go with him.
Oh, was it 2 friends? Okay.
Yeah, one of the friends appeared on the show, and the other one passed away in 2016.
That's right. One of them passed away. Yeah, and so they all went out, and they decided to go down a road they'd never gone down before towards Lily Pond, which is interesting because they had lived there, and his adult children had been raised there, but they hadn't gone down here before, and for some reason, they decided to go down this place that they'd never gone to before.
Well, to clarify it, they've been down in that area. They've never hunted it before.
Right. Yeah, they've never hunted down there.
So they knew the area, but they've never hunted it before. And I think the son was like, we've never done that before. Let's go do that.
Yes. Yeah. So they were familiar with the land and the layout. They just had never gone to hunt.
Right.
So Thomas decides that he's going to stay there, and he's going to be what they call a watcher. So the other people with him, they go around, and they're going to go on top of this area. And what they do is they're going to chase anything they find down towards Tom so that he can shoot them. If a deer comes running, he's the watcher. They're going to let him know. They all have walkie-talkies. They can communicate. They're going to let him know that the deer are coming. Look out for it. And they sat out there for a couple hours. Nothing happened. So then what, Jory?
Well, to put it in a broader perspective, so the sons, the younger ones, they actually climbed up the hill, and then the older gentlemen, the three of them, the man we're talking about and his two friends, they separated into 100-yard increments. So they were all within 100 yards of each other except for the sons. They climbed the hill. And like you said, the older gentlemen were the watchers. The young boys were supposed to, no, well, they weren't younger.
Yeah.
We're supposed to then, they were spotters. So what they did was they spotted whatever animal they were hunting, let's just say a deer, and then they chased it to the watcher. That's when the watcher would shoot the animal. So one of the gentlemen who was a watcher had said that the only thing that was weird about the entire trip was that he heard a noise. That wasn't something that he had heard ever before in the forest. And this is another person who has hunted in the woods for years.
Yes, and his name was Sid.
And yeah, Sid. And he couldn't describe the noise, but years prior he had tried to describe the noise to his son, who was taught how to hunt by the gentleman we're talking about. And he said it was like the closest way he could describe it was like a trap closing, a giant trap closing.
Yeah.
But that was the only odd sound that they had heard. So fast forward a couple hours later, they've decided that they haven't got anything. They'd only plan on being there a couple hours anyways. It was time to pack up and go home because it was getting late. Everybody met up at the truck except for
Tom.
Thank you. So even though they thought it a little bit weird, they just thought he was hanging behind, and so they decided to call out to him. No answer. So they got into the truck and started driving up and down the road, calling for him. And at this point, it's dark outside.
Yes, and for those of you who hunt, you know that you don't hunt in the dark.
No.
Because what you see could be a person. So they know he's not out there hunting. And something they teach you in hunting classes is to then shoot your gun off into the air 3 times, which they started doing. It shows if a person is lost, it gives them sound to go to. Or they can return a gunshot 3 times so that you can come find them if they're injured. I'm sorry, Jory.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so they were doing that and calling out to him and using the walkie-talkie, and they weren't getting any response. They could not find him. And one of the sons ends up calling Tom's wife and letting him know, hey, we think Dad's missing, but don't worry, we'll find him. Well, she decides she wants to go up. And the son convinces her to stay home and that they'll find him and that they're going back to the cabin because maybe Dad went back to the cabin. Dad never made it back to the cabin. So the next day is when everybody starts the search party. And it seems like it's almost immediate. Like they wake up the next day, he's still not back. It's search party time. And there's a very small village next to the lake. And even with that tiny community, they still managed to get, I think it was like 200 volunteers.
Yes.
To come out to the pond and search for Tom by using what you called the spider grid. And they would just section off forests using this spider grid to show that they had searched this area. And the son said that it was like a giant spider web by the time that they were done with the forest. You couldn't walk anywhere without just strings and string because they would re-canvas what they had already searched. And so
and they were walking like 3 feet apart.
Spider web. Yeah. It was one big giant spider's web looking for this gentleman with no sign. He had food on him. There was no sign of food. He had water on him. There was no sign of a canteen. He had his weapons on him. They couldn't find his weapons. They couldn't find his clothes. It was as if he walked into the woods and disappeared, vanished.
Well, and that first day when the sheriff, or it might have been the
It was the
park.
undersheriff.
Okay, the undersheriff pulled into his office. He saw a helicopter across the street in the parking lot. Now, this is how fast this is happening. And black SUVs. And he's told the FBI's here. And the FBI does not search for missing adults. In their policy is they do not search for missing adults. They have a subset of the FBI that does search for missing children, but even then, they have to meet certain criteria. By, like, for instance, being taken off a street by a stranger. That, somebody witnesses them being, pulled off their bike, etc. For the FBI to get involved. Otherwise, the FBI doesn't get involved in a search, and they told them when they got there that they were taking notes, and what they referred to it as they were monitoring. And according to the FBI, monitoring means taking notes for a behavioral profile that is then sent back to Quantico to see if it matches up with any other cases in the area. The FBI agents told Tom's wife that he knew something wasn't right with Tom's disappearance, but he didn't know what it was. Couldn't say what it was, which is strange. On the second day of the search, hard rain came down, of course, but they still went out there and searched. And like Joyce said, when they did do the spider web, they were in some spaces searching, like they would reach out, touch their arms, and that's how far they would walk and drag the string down. So it felt to the family and the police department, who was suddenly nudged out of this search while the FBI brought in helicopters and all this stuff, that they knew what had happened and what they were looking for. Because that doesn't happen when an old guy just goes missing in the forest when he was hunting. Right?
Well, right. And it's later explained that several miles away in another town, another elderly gentleman who likes to hunt.
40 miles away.
Yeah, 40 miles away, another elderly gentleman who was an avid outdoor huntsman guy stayed home while his wife left the house to do, I think it was like just grocery shopping.
It was
basic.
Thanksgiving. She went to a Thanksgiving banquet. He stayed home.
That's right, a banquet, and he stayed home. He chose to stay home. And when she came home, his car was still there. All of his belongings were still there. He just was not there, and she never saw him again. He was gone, just gone. And he didn't. And in both of these cases, neither of these gentlemen had dementia or Alzheimer's,
right.
or they didn't have a degenerative mental disease of any kind. They were very much family men and very happy with their lives. And these gentlemen literally just disappeared off the face of the planet with no sign, no trace, nothing.
Yeah, and in the case of Tom,
40 miles of each other.
Within days of each other. As a matter of fact, they took people from Tom's search over to search for Fred Drum, who's the second gentleman you're speaking of, because they were there anyway. So they brought them over and the FBI over to do the same kind of search. But the thing is what somebody said about Tom, and it might have been his wife, that was really, or maybe his son, I don't know, very interesting to me, is that they didn't even find his gun. It's his gun would not blow away in the wind, he said.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when we talk about the fact that they don't find their clothing or a body or whatever, people who doubt this will say, well, they would have been eaten by an animal. Well, that's not how it works. An animal doesn't unhinge its jaw and just shove a human body in. They, tear the clothing, they rip the clothing, and also, this is maybe too much information, but when they poop out bones and clothing.
And just as a side note too, we didn't mention they also did dredge the pond with a professional scuba diving team, and they never found a body either.
Yes, and he was quite a ways from the pond anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife said she's 100% certain that as a watcher, for as long as this man has been hunting, probably since he was 3 and could hold a gun, he would not move from his spot as a watcher. If that's your job, that's your job. That's the kind of person he was. So, I think the cases where the FBI does get involved makes it even creepier to me. Especially when another gentleman with basically the same sort of description suddenly goes disappearing. No, nothing, just gone. No dog trail can find them. Nothing. And so the next one is what they call the Santa Fe cluster. And like I said earlier, there's 15 people missing in the Santa Fe National Forest, and within a matter of a few years. So the first one, do you want to talk about, Jory, is Audrey Kaplan?
Yeah, so if I remember this one correctly, she and her husband lived in the city of Santa Fe,
Mm-hmm.
and they decided that they wanted to go up into the Santa Fe National Forest and pick mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so they drive up this trail as far as they can go, and then they park, and then they continue up the trail on foot. And then here comes the point of separation. The documentary makes it sound like it was a accidental separation, like it
Yes, it
like it
did.
wasn't supposed to happen. Um, so the husband right away notices she's gone. He can't find her and calls the park ranger. And they do a search for her. And they search the immediate area that she was last known to be in. And then they spread it out a little bit more, and they still can't find her. And then there was a snowstorm that came through on day 2, right? The
Yeah,
very next day, there
thunderstorms.
was a
Thunderstorms.
snowstorm, or thunderstorms,
Mm-hmm.
correct.
Yeah, because it was in July of 2014, which is the hottest month of the year in New Mexico, which is going to come up in a little while. So keep that in mind. It is the hottest month of the year. This woman was 75 years old, but she was in very good shape. Okay, so yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so um, a volunteer, how many miles was this away from the last known location? Like 7 to 10 or something
Yeah,
like
I
that?
believe it was that
It
much,
was about
yes.
7 miles away from her last known location, which the husband said she wouldn't have gone that far.
Yes, because she was
A
just hunting for
volunteer,
mushrooms.
yeah, they were just looking for mushrooms, and it didn't make sense for her to go this far. But a volunteer searcher came across this little creek, this tiny little river, and happened to notice this makeshift camp.
Mm-hmm.
And they went down there and saw a little makeshift tent and backpack and supplies. And next to the tent was this woman completely naked in the fetal position, and she had passed away.
Yes. She was in the
And
creek.
they said that she was in the creek, but her face wasn't actually in water.
Well, that's what the coroner said. But when they showed the pictures of the crime, they called it a crime scene. She is in the creek with her face. Her face is upside down, face forward into the creek. So that's what the weird part is about the. By the way, they found her on August. They found her on August 4th, so it had been a
It was
minute.
several. I think it said it was 5 days she had been
Yeah,
missing with the thunderstorm, and they
yeah,
found her with a campground, completely naked in fetal position in the creek, dead.
yeah. And it didn't make it seem like it was her camping gear, right? I mean, if you're just going out for a couple hours to go mushroom hunting, you don't take a tent and
Well, I think she probably made a tent based off the supplies that she had. I don't think she
I
actually had
see.
like a real. I don't think she had a real tent.
So you got the impression that it was her things, not that not that somebody else had been camping by the stream.
The impression I got was that she made, because it described them as outdoorsman type people, and obviously
Mm,
they were, because they knew where to pick mushrooms. So the
yeah.
vibe I got from it was that she knew enough to figure out how to jimmy herself a campground. Which, if she's an
Yeah.
outdoorsman, then she knew that she had to put a campground near water, which she did. She camped by the
Yes.
creek. But what doesn't make sense is why was she completely naked in the fetal position in the water?
Yes. And I got the impression too that they believed it was her belongings. The coroner report said that she died from hypothermia, which now think back for a minute. In July in New Mexico, the hottest month of the year, so she died from hypothermia. Although in the same paragraph that he says she died from hypothermia, he also says that he found no physical evidence of hypothermia. So, um, David Paulides was talking about how what an odd thing that is. Because hold up a minute. There's no evidence that she died of hypothermia. So therefore, my conclusion is she died of hypothermia. And in the report, it also said that her face was not in the water. But the photos, and they do show the photos blurred out um, on the documentary, the photos show that she is clearly in this little creek. This is not a big river. It's a small little creek. So the question is, it really feels like the coroner either just rushed to this and didn't give a crap, or intentionally misled what had happened to her. For one thing, I don't know what difference it makes if her face is in the creek or not. I don't know why you would change that on the report, right?
Right.
And um, and being July, it had rained one day, but still, as you and I know, in hot states, when it rains, it don't get cold. It just makes it humid. You know, so I don't believe, nobody believes that it would have gotten cold enough for her to die from hypothermia, especially considering that she was an avid sportsman and would know how to take care of herself.
And that's another issue too, is it's confusing enough the way but the fact that she got lost and not only couldn't find her way back, but ended up I think it was like 7 miles in
Mhm.
the completely different direction of where she came from.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like what the discrepancy here is what's really going on. She's somebody who was in the woods a lot, enough to know where to pick mushrooms, enough to know how to make her own camp. But she couldn't figure out how to get back to her vehicle after being separated from her husband and died of hypothermia in the middle of July in New Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah. The weird thing that a lot of these, most of these things have in common is that these completely normal people that do not have any history of a mental illness or Alzheimer's or something like that to that effect, they, for some reason, are inspired to wander off and just keep going. We're going to come up with another one pretty soon where this man had to travel over shale sharp as glass with no shoes on. You know, it's it's very strange. It's almost as if they, I don't know, like check out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a very common thing. Even the children that are found, they're found up a mountain 1,500 feet. I just did one that he was found 2,000 feet up the side of a shale cliff. A 3-year-old. What? He was passed away. They didn't find him until later. But you're just like, what? What happens to make this woman not mentally ill, doesn't have signs of Alzheimer's, just out looking for mushrooms? Wander 7 miles away and start camping by a creek. You didn't turn around and go back at any point or call out. So it's just the extra strangeness of the thing, and that to add on top of it, that the
Mm-hmm.
coroner changed the facts of what happened and why. Also, in that cluster, which they talked about, I think 3 people in the cluster, was Mel Nadel, who went missing on September 6, 2009. He was 61 years old. He was an elk hunter. Do you want to talk about him?
Yeah, so I believe this was the gentleman that he he twisted his ankle prior to this event, but otherwise he was in perfectly good condition.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, 61 years old and an avid outdoorsman. And he met up with 2 buddies that he works with
Mm-hmm.
at a hunting site. And they separated. The 2 buddies went somewhere and he went into the woods. And there was a time limit. It was supposed to be like 2 hours or whatever. And then they'd meet back up at the truck because this was another late afternoon
Yes.
situation.
But one thing that is critical to say here is that the reason he didn't go with his buddies was because he hated walking. His wife said that if he had seen an elk, he wouldn't have even walked to go shoot it. He had pointed 100 yards away and said, "I'll be sitting there on that rock."
Right.
And they went. So they were gonna go either shoot was it elk they was searching
Mm-hmm.
for? Okay, or they were gonna send them Mel's way as a watcher. So it's very important to remember that this man, his wife repeatedly says in the documentary, he hated walking.
Well,
He would set
especially
up
with
a
a
deer
sprained
blind.
ankle.
Yeah, he would set up a deer blind and he would sit there all day. He was not the kind of hunter that walks through the woods trying to find a as his prey. And he had a hurt ankle on top of it, so he was not going to go anywhere. So that's very important to remember that he's as we talked about the point of separation, and sometimes there's an injury. He had a very, very minor injury and hated walking. So go ahead, Jor.
Yeah, so the time limit passed. The buddies made it back to the truck. He didn't. Same situation as 2 stories prior. Buddies went looking for him, shooting their gun in the air. I believe did they have walkie-talkies? Maybe not. But they were shooting the gun in the air. They couldn't find him. And then another group of hunters passed by and they had a satellite phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so, oh no, this was the one they waited till the next day, right? Was it like 24 hours later?
No, that's well he no that's the one coming up with the guy who went for the cash.
Okay. So this was the one where the group of hunters with the satellite phone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they showed up. They called in their buddy missing. Um, Next day there was a big search party once again. People looked for this gentleman and couldn't find him. And same situation. There was no sign of him. Couldn't find his weapon. Couldn't find clothes. Couldn't find. And he had food and drink on him. Couldn't find any of
Mm-hmm.
that.
And he had 2 weapons. He had a gun and a bow, an arrow,
He had a
or
gun
more
and a
than one
bow.
arrow.
Hmm
Yeah.
He always kept Was this the one that always kept a pistol on him?
Yes. Always kept a pistol.
Always kept a pistol on his person. Um, And then I can't remember the time frame on this. I can't remember if this was several days later or if it was a longer period of time. But like 11 miles down from this area that follows a riverbed, um, a person that was on a walk along this riverbed found a body just floating in the river or near the river, or it was
Wait.
on
Nope,
the
this
bank,
isn't him.
right?
This is the next one coming up. That's the next one coming up. This one, they never found anything of his ever. He completely disappeared. They
Oh,
brought search
really?
dogs in. Yeah, they brought search dogs in. The dogs followed his scent to the rock he was supposed to sit on, that he told them they were sitting on, and then it was gone.
Okay, so this was the one that just completely vanished.
Completely vanished. And
That's
when
right.
David is asking the guy, well, what do you think happened to him? The sheriff, he goes, probably picked up by a UFO. And then he laughs, like an awkward laugh, and he goes, I'm sure he got a ride out. I'm sure somebody picked him up in a truck and got him a ride out. Well, he was supposed to be spending the night. He had the equipment. They were going to spend the night there. His wife wasn't expecting him, and P.S., he has never been seen again. So he didn't just leave his hunting buddies and then disappear. So the next one in this group is Stanley Vigil, who disappeared on November 7th, 2017, so not long ago. And he disappeared 10 miles from where Mel disappeared. He was driving on the street, yes, on a back road, him and some friends, looking for deer. They were going to shoot him out of their truck, which I think is illegal, by the way. Well, I don't know about there, but where I grew up it was. Anyway, they saw a deer. Stanley jumps out of the truck and runs after him. And the second he got out of the truck and stepped away from the truck, a thunderstorm hit immediately, and it became so foggy that the people in the truck couldn't see him after 3 feet away from the truck. He was gone. They couldn't see him anymore. So chances are he wasn't able to see the deer either. And then go ahead. Then that's when you're coming up to your part.
So this was the gentleman. Okay, so he went missing, and See, they didn't focus too much. They focused more on Mel. So this one was a really quick one, but
Yeah.
this was the one where it turned up like his body ended up being like 11 miles away,
Mhm.
um, on a riverbed, and a person that was just kind of on a walk saw the body and called it in, and that's when they found him. And this was several days later.
Yeah.
Um,
They had a
but
7-day
they,
search.
yeah, like a 7 day search, but they couldn't figure out how he
Oh, it
got
was
from
actually
jumping out of
5 months
that truck
later that they found him.
after a 7 day search, though.
Yeah, after the 7-day search. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they couldn't figure out how 5 months later they found his body 11 miles from where he had jumped out of the truck to go chase that deer. That deer.
Mhm. In a different direction. He had 2 broken ribs and some skull injuries. The coroner said he drowned. Um, nobody. They brought out dogs to track him. They couldn't. They couldn't get up. They couldn't get a track on him anywhere. And like I said, they said that was very weird because he's just a few miles from where Mel disappeared. Jumps out of a car. It's like a Twilight Zone episode. Jumps out of his truck. As soon as he gets out, a dark thunderstorm hits. Fog so thick the people in the truck couldn't see him anymore. And 5 minutes later, he ends up in a river with broken ribs, skull fractures, and he drowned. I It doesn't even make sense. It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, if it's foggy, if it's foggy, you can't see. It's pouring down rain and thunder and lightning. Don't you just say, I'm going to go ahead and get back in the truck.
Well,
But
what I don't understand is if he jumps out of the truck to go get the deer, did the person driving the truck not stop?
yeah, they stopped. They stopped to wait for him.
So then how does this gentleman, as soon as he gets out of the truck and it's raining and it gets foggy, how does he not just turn around and walk back to the truck?
Yeah, that's what I mean. You are now in a severe downpour. You can't see this deer anymore. It is not that important. Get back in the truck. They were still there. He knew they weren't going to go find him 11 miles away in a river.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they weren't even the kind of hunters who got out and walked. They were shooting from the
And if
truck.
you, and you, like I understand it's raining, it's foggy, but depending on how far you went into the woods for this deer, let's say you at least separated from the truck to a point where you can't find it. You don't know where the road is?
Yeah, yeah. Turn around, go back the way you came.
You can't at least get to the road and then follow the road back down the hill, the mountain?
Yeah. Yeah, so the weirdest, strangest thing. Oh, by the way, the man who found him was an off-duty police officer and his
That's
son.
right. That's right.
And then the next one part of this documentary is called The Crazies, which is not just me. Uh, it's actually a mountain range. And so this section is going to talk about the Crazies, and it really concentrates on a man whose name was Aaron Hedges. So Aaron Hedges was 38 years old. He went missing on September 5th, 2014. He had gone with a group of people. They had taken a donkey and 2 horses to carry their stuff, along the trail, which, by the way, is pretty brilliant. Um, Along the way, one of the horses threw a fit, reared, and all of his stuff went flying all over everywhere. They were trying to get to their campground before dark, So, for some reason, they don't hurry up and run and grab his things, which ends up being a horrible mistake. They decide, all right, we're just going to go on. So they go on. He hunts in this area every other day all year long. Literally every other day all year long. He hunts in this area. He knows it like the back of his hand, which is why they didn't stop and grab his stuff, because he has what they call a cache hidden throughout this area. Many caches, they said, several, that he has placed out here for just in case of emergency. So he says, okay, you stay at the camp. I'm going to go grab the cache real quick. I'll be right back. And it was just a few miles away. And so that was that. The area where he had to... So there's a path. It's a very clearly marked path. This is a path that many people walk on to go on these hunting trips or camping. And in this path, there's a fork. And the fork is sort of like a shale pile. So it's kind of a bunch of rocks. Somebody who goes here every other day for a year knows that this is the fork he needs to take to go get his cache. He's supposed to take a left here. If he goes on further, he's going to see that there's a river, and he's going to know, oh, I went too far, I hit the river, I got to go back. Also keep in mind that there's one river and it goes one way. If you follow this river all the way down, you will end up in town. It's just the people they interviewed said everybody knows this. Follow the river. You can't get lost on this mountain area. You just end up right in the middle of town. So he has a beacon on him, and it goes off. But it's nowhere near where the cache is. He's walked a couple miles past that fork. And he's come to the river. That's where the beacon goes off. It's the river. So do you want to take it from here, Jor?
Yeah, so the beacon goes off, and wasn't it that he had placed a phone call to them or tried to?
Yeah,
And that's why the beacon went off?
Yeah, he had tried to place a phone call, and for some reason it wouldn't go. And then it snowed that night 2 feet in 24 hours.
Yeah, and his buddies didn't think it too strange that he didn't make it back to camp at night because of how well he knew the area and he had all these secret caches. So they went to sleep without him coming back to camp.
Yeah.
And it was the very next day. As a matter of fact, it was 24 hours from the point of them starting the hike to the camp. So almost going back into being night again the following day.
Mm-hmm.
Where they decide, we think he might be lost now.
Yeah, and by the way, the snow is melted now. It went from snowing to 55 degrees. So it was just a random 2 foot of snowfall, boom, gone.
Yeah. By the way, this is in Montana for everybody at home. So, and the Crazies are not actually that big of a mountain. As a matter of fact, didn't they say it's like the youngest mountain range in the United States?
It is, yeah. And it's like they call it like an island of mountains. It doesn't belong to the Rocky Mountain Range. Yeah. It's younger, so young that it's younger than the Rocky Mountain Range, and it's just like I said, they call it an island of mountains. It's just very small, comparatively speaking.
And like you said, it's got one river, and that river flows right into the town. So you can't get lost. You can't get lost in these mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So, so they know that his last ping point was several miles away from the fork at the river. So they start the search in that general area. And at this point of the interview, they start interviewing a search and rescue helicopter pilot. And he's talking about how they searched the mountain zones. And as they ascended, I think they ascended a hill, didn't they? They were up on a hill above where the river was. And as they were clearing out this grid, one of the people in the helicopter noticed a pair of boots underneath a tree. So they land near this area and they go search that spot. And sure enough, there's a pair of boots. It ends up being his boots, just neatly placed. The gentleman's water bladder was there, and a couple other survival items were there, like a little bit of I think it was like food.
He lit a fire. His cigarette pack was in the fire.
Yeah, like he had put up a camp.
Yeah.
But because his boots were there and he wasn't, they automatically assumed that he now has hypothermia.
Right.
And so they're like, well, he's not going to get very far. So they actually shortened their grid, assuming that if he has hypothermia, he should be nearby.
Right. And can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
This area is literally like on the line of two counties. So rescue searchers came from both counties and met in the middle. And they're both on the same trail. Because this trail, is kind of runs adjacent to the river. So they meet in the middle, and neither group of people, which is canine units, rescue teams, the police department, all that stuff, sheriffs. None of them, either group, has seen this man anywhere, and the helicopters, of course, haven't seen him. So there was a lot of people out there looking, and other than the fact that he had set up camp, which makes sense. If it was snowing, he probably thought, oh God, I'll just stay here tonight and truck on back tomorrow. But like you said, then his boots were there, and I think the straps to his waist pack was there as well. He had cut off the straps to his waist pack. And they asked the sheriff's officer, who also used to be a canine officer, why do you think he would do that? And he said, well, you could stick your hands in there, and it's a little bit insulated. So we thought maybe that's what he did. Which, okay. Well, I guess that'd be, using what you got.
But that was still a worry because... that's kind of a big no-no to do in the first place unless you're in a really big emergency.
Well, yeah, and that wasn't there. That pack wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, his gun wasn't there. His pack wasn't there. He also had another backpack. And he left his water, his boots, and something else.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just the straps. Yeah.
So, this is almost a year later. The Crazies seem to have like a small population of people living around them because there's a gentleman with his family that owned this big old ranch that's 9 miles away from the location of the camp. And him and his father-in-law are rebuilding their fences from after winter damage. And they're at the property line setting these fences, and the father-in-law notices a backpack up against a tree on their property line. So they go over and they check out the area, and the backpack is just neatly sitting up against a tree.
Well, the father-in-law makes a joke and goes, some stupid hunter left his stuff here. Because remember they had found a rock where he had been sitting, or no, that was after this, but the canteen with the coffee. Because he goes, hey, has there been a hunter missing around here? Let's just being a smartass. And his son-in-law was like, as a matter of fact, yes, because
Yeah.
They'd seen the helicopters, and he goes, well, the stuff's still in the pack, so they went and looked through it. Yeah.
They went and looked for it through it, and they found his hunter's license, his identification. They found his weapons,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, one of his guns was laying on the ground right next to his pack.
and they had found his canteen where he had created a makeshift energy drink and drank out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like it was like a little resting spot. And so they called it in the search and rescue team. Now, mind you, this is almost a year later. So the original people who came or who tried to look for him went there and saw all of his stuff there, and they were like, so let me get this right. He hikes to go get his cash, which I think they said was only about a mile or two away from the camp.
Yeah, it was very close.
His last known ping was 3 miles off the marker.
Mm-hmm.
Then they find a small campground with his boots up a hill another couple miles away from his last ping. And now, almost a year later, they find some of his goods, his stuff, 7 miles from that location. So he somehow, after it had snowed, without boots, supposedly with hypothermia, hiked 7 miles to the property line of this guy, and instead of getting help, took a break and drank an energy drink.
Yeah, like right to his. There's a fence. There is a fence. You know it's a property line. And also, I want to say that where the fire was, and where the bladder and all that stuff, the searchers said that they had all gone through there 2 days earlier, and none of that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And now it was 2 days later. Now it's right there, laid down nice and neat, his boots. And they had said that even if you had walked through that shale with regular tennis shoes on, it would have torn your feet up. It would have torn right through the shoes, tore the skin off your feet. So you had to have like special hiking boots, which he had taken off, and somehow, like you said, walked all that way with supposed hypothermia, when, by the way, it warmed back up in less than 24 hours. Walked all that way with hypothermia, 11 miles from where he was last seen, where he had left those guys at the camp. 7 miles from where his last ping was. With no shoes on, sitting there like it was any other day, just drinking an energy drink.
Mm-hmm. And it still had food. It still had food in the pack. Now, mind you, this is almost a year later.
So, what that is, Jory, I just considered this. Where did he get this stuff? Had he went and found a cache somewhere else?
Well, we don't. We also don't know the timeline of when that gentleman. Because if we further the story along, another year passes. Okay, so this is a year from that event.
Mm-hmm.
The property that borders the gentleman who discovered the pack is a dude ranch, and they were doing some kind of a tour of the dude ranch for tourists to the area, and some lady just looks over and says, "That looks like a skull."
Yeah.
And everybody sees just this human skull just sitting there.
Yep, right out in the open.
And so they call the sheriff, who once again headed the search for this guy 2 years prior.
Yeah.
They go out and they search the area, and they find his skull and some other pieces of his body, but not a lot. And they found his cell phone. And I think it was basically the last of the belongings that he had on him.
Yeah.
And
they couldn't get any information off his cell phone.
Couldn't get any information off his cell phone, but it blew his mind. He was like, just 3 miles away, you were at the property line of this guy, but instead of getting help, you end up 3 miles away from that on this dude ranch property, and you're dead. And you had a cell phone on you the entire time.
Yeah, and food and water.
And food and water.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, like, he had a backpack, he had a yellow vest, he had his shotgun and all that stuff. Um, if he left the camp originally, did he take his this backpack with him to go get his cash? Because I thought he had lost everything.
I don't know. The documentary didn't
Yeah.
make it clear because how I took it was something spooked the horse.
Yes.
So it made all of his belongings fall off the horse, but it
Yeah.
made it sound like they picked everything back up, or at least as much as they could. Went back to camp, and then maybe they were I'm trying to remember how this went.
See, I
It
thought
sounded
that they
like maybe
didn't
they
get his
didn't get
things. Yeah.
it made it sound like maybe he didn't get everything, but to me it was like, well, why would you hike all the way to that secret cache instead of just, okay, we set up camp. I'm going to go back.
Yes, tomorrow I'll walk a mile back on the trail and
Why
pick
don't
up
I
my
go
stuff.
back on the trail and pick up my stuff? Why would you walk back? Why would you walk further into the mountain to get a
Yeah.
secret cache that's for emergencies when your
Yes.
stuff is a mile back towards
Right there on
your
the trail.
vehicle just sitting on the trail?
Yes. That's another weird thing. I wanted the same thing. Why didn't you turn around, like in the morning? If you have your backpack, you have the things you need to sleep with, and obviously you had cigarettes and all that stuff. So just go to sleep. Tomorrow you guys head back and gather up everything he's missing, and then you start your hunting. Call it a day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why would you go 2 or 3 miles to the cache, which is not that's not there and back. That's 2 or 3 miles to there, 2 or 3 miles back. That makes no
Yeah.
sense. Six
Yeah.
miles when you could have just taken a
Done two
horse.
miles.
They had the horses and everything with them. Get on a horse, ride back, get your stuff. It's going to take you no time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that also is crazy to me. And if you're going to get your cash, why are, I guess maybe because he was always I mean, what was it that he didn't have? If he had food, he had a backpack, he had clothing, he had his waist belt, he had his weapons. What was it that he didn't have?
This was the one that confused me the most out of all the stories because this was a guy who hunted that area regularly.
Yeah.
Him and his buddies were very well prepared. I mean, they brought horses and a donkey for crying out loud.
Yeah.
This is a mountain that everybody in town knows. So this isn't
Right.
just some random mountain out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
This is a mountain that borders a town, and everybody in that town knows that mountain.
Yes.
Everybody knows there's a river that goes down into town. So even the worst hunter in the world could still find his way out of
Yes.
this mountain.
As a matter of fact, the people being interviewed laughed about it.
Yeah.
They were like, "You can't get lost here."
So for a guy who hunts this place regularly, knows it like the back of his hand to the point where he has secret caches throughout the mountain,
Yeah.
and has uh, uh, something on his body that pings when he makes phone calls.
Yes.
How does he not only not make it to the cache, but build a campground up the hill from the cache,
Yeah.
take his boots off, leave his water bladder behind,
Yeah.
walk 7 miles barefoot through sleet
Yeah.
to the border of somebody's ranch, take a break, drink an energy drink, and then die 3 miles away on a dude ranch that clearly has people on it because it was a fucking group of campers. Or
Yes.
not campers, but
Yes.
tourists. It was a
Dude.
group of tourists
Yeah.
that
People who
found
go
his
to the dude
body.
ranch.
That people who go to. So this one, it blew my mind because you want to say, well, I mean, this was clearly a case of suicide, but at the same time, if he wanted to kill himself,
And that was a
he chose
long,
the
longest way
most rugged way to kill himself.
over days.
He walked barefoot
Yes.
7 miles through sleet. I mean, take away the weather conditions, you still have to walk down a mountain
Yeah, but
barefoot.
think about this. Something spooked the horse, and that's what happened. That's what got this whole thing rolling, right? So if it was suicide, I mean, this came out of nowhere. It couldn't have been suicide because this horse accident was an accident. According to his buddies, something spooked the horse. They should have been listening to that horse. And then another thing. So let's say for some reason, obviously, he didn't want to go back and get his stuff that was right there on the ground. Why didn't he take a horse and ride it to get his cash? You have 2 horses and a donkey. They
Yeah.
are there for this.
Yeah.
Ride a horse, get your stuff, come back. It just make the decision, one decision after another.
The whole story doesn't make sense. Like,
It
I mean,
doesn't make sense.
you can look at the other ones and think freak accidents. This
Yes.
is the one outside of the first story we talked about with Tom. This is the one that really makes you question, like, what the hell? Like, how
Yeah.
does somebody who hunts this area to the point where he has secret caches
Yes.
everywhere, and
Yes.
everybody and their mama can hike this mountain?
Yes.
How does he not only not make it to his cache, but die 11 miles from his last ping,
Yeah.
even at the point of being next to people who can help him virtually the entire time?
He's on a fence surrounding a person's home. You crawl the fence, you climb over the fence, and you just start walking.
Well, clearly he wasn't even in trouble because he took a break. Like, he
Yeah.
ate food. He had food. He drank an
Yes.
energy drink because he was probably tired from walking 7 miles barefoot.
Over shards of rock, glass-like rock, barefoot.
Uh,
Yeah, I don't know because they
this
don't
one
mention
truly
that
blew
this
my
guy
mind.
has any like psychosis or anything, and you know they didn't say he like snapped, and all of a sudden he like what snapped on his way to the cache, but and he knows this so well that this mountain isn't large. He hikes it. He hunts and hikes every other day. He knew he had missed. Let's say he accidentally missed the fork, because the copter pilot says, well, if it was snowing, he could have missed the fork. And the guy goes, it wasn't snowing, it was bare ground. And he goes, then he would have known he missed it as soon as he saw the river, right? And he said, oh, well, yeah.
Hmm.
As soon as he saw the river, he would have gone, oh, I overshot my mark. You turn around. You turn around. This is a clearly marked path.
See, I think something happened when he tried to make the phone call because he never tries to make a phone call again except for
Yeah.
when he's 3 miles from the fork and he's
Yes.
pinged trying to make a phone call.
Yes. Yes.
Something
Something happened.
happened there that
Yep.
then proceeded the following 2 years. What happened
Yeah.
at that spot at the river, 3 miles from the fork, that caused him to make the one phone call he made? Because he never made another phone call again.
Yeah. Yep. And that's another thing I said earlier that it seems like these people make like illogical choices. Like the woman who was hunting for mushrooms, and I'm gonna have to hurry this up because my iPad is gonna die. Um, the illogical choice to keep walking 11 miles away, um, or you're sitting on a rock and you're supposed to be a watcher, and maybe you make the illogical choice to. I mean, I don't even know what happened to Tom, but this from the get go was an illogical choice after illogical choice after illogical choice. Because, like you said, you go back a mile, you grab your stuff, you don't go to your hidden cache, which is for emergencies, and you have most of your things. It's not an emergency at all. You have your
Mm-hmm.
buddies. Nobody's hurt. Go get your stuff in the morning, at 4:30 before you start hunting. It's not an emergency. Why? And then to walk past it, like you said, it just. And then when he made the phone call, did he realize like something is wrong? Something's wrong.
Right. Right.
Come out of this fog of illogical choices and think, oh, what the heck's going on? And then that's it. He has a cell phone the whole time. When he's down there by the Dude Ranch, when he's down there by, this is only a matter of days, people. These are days, 24 hours. These are hours. He has his phone. He's down there by these people's home. He could have picked up the phone right then and called 911.
Yeah.
Or his buddies and been like, I don't know what happened, but I got so lost. Or if they didn't have a signal, you call the cops. He's right there with a phone where people live who obviously have a signal. Yeah, this is the one that was like, no wonder it's called the Crazies, because I didn't get it.
Yeah, the timing of it was weird. Like what was the time frame from them finding the boots? Because you said that the searchers had searched that area 2 days prior. Nothing
2 days
was there.
prior, yeah, nothing was there.
And then 2 days later, they found the boots in the campground. So from
Yep.
that point, it took almost an entire year until the
Yeah.
property owner of the ranch or his father-in-law found the backpack leaning up against a tree at their
Yeah.
property line. So
Yeah, and
how
nicely placed.
long?
Everything was put like in its place.
Yeah, how long did it take him to get from point A to point B? And then from that point, how long ago was that? And where had like how long had it been since he had been in that spot? Because
Right.
it's almost a year later from the time they found the boots to the time they found his backpack. 7 miles apart from each other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And none of that's figured out.
Yeah. Well, that's the weird thing about these things too, is if it happens in nature, if it happens in a mountain or a forest, then they're just kind of like, well, okay. Now, I do need to talk about oh man. There's a whole other part of this that we need to talk about. The 3 disappearances in the same spot, the hunting camp, um, where the hunters had that hunting camp that they hid,
Mm-hmm.
and then the one that I promised everybody on my channel that they would be hearing about. Um, do you think that we should do? Do you think that we can do that? I have 22% on my iPad. Do you think that we have enough time to talk about the, the other stuff?
What was your iPad at when we started talking?
53.
Probably not.
So do you
We'll
want
have
to
to
do
make this a two-parter, I guess.
you want to make it a two-parter,
I
or
guess I have
do you
to.
want to we can skip down from I can go over real fast the 3 people in Sonora. We can do um the camp, and then the one with the
Well, I
woman
mean,
is actually quick.
if we're gonna fast forward it, so we're jumping from the Crazies to the Sonoras in California,
Yeah,
and essentially 3 people go missing in the same area.
the exact same area.
In the exact same area, like not, not, oh, this was 10 miles apart. No, this was the exact same area.
Yeah.
And in this area is a hidden hunters colony that was created in the 1950s. And this was
Yes.
basically they basically try to create their own little town.
Yeah, so let's do that. So, in October of 2016, there's a person who goes missing. In April of 2014, a woman goes missing. Of August 8th, 2005, a woman goes missing. We're telling you this because it's very close to. And by the way, none of these people were ever found. They were gone without a trace. Nothing of theirs was
There
ever
was
found.
never a body was found. One of the women, her car still had her purse and her cell phone in it.
Mm-hmm.
The gentleman who was found his car was found on the side of the road,
Mm-hmm.
and no trace was ever found of any of
Nope.
these people.
They took helicopters, searchers, dogs, the whole thing. Couldn't find them. No trace. And then let's talk about the hunting thing. And I just want to do the Bruce Maccabee one real quick after that. So tell them about the hunting camp, which was in a national park. It was illegal to be there. They were just a group of friends. They didn't tell anybody it was there. The hunting was really good, and they figured as long as they kept it quiet, and between the like 5 of them, nobody was going to know the difference. So don't invite anybody. The rule was that you're not supposed to invite anybody or tell anybody that this camp is here. And they built this shelter around a tree. So they leaned up logs around a tree, which is a little strange. But it was like sort of like a wood log teepee, I guess. And it had a door on it, and that's where they would sleep in the shelter. So, yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and just for everybody, a quick side note, the forest rangers found this place and shut it down.
Yes, forest rangers found it.
They still congregate there regardless, but they had a working stove and they had a shelter built that got all torn apart. But they still go there anyways because this is America, damn it.
That's right. And this camp had been there since the 50s. It's this secret camp, so their fathers had known about it, and
So one of the people interviewed said that there was always a lot of strange stuff that would happen in that area, and he would claim to see strange lights. He would claim to hear strange noises, and the guy who presents this documentary even said that he wouldn't have even shown this part of the documentary except for the evidence that was given to him. And so the evidence that was given to him about strange noises was one of these hunters turned on a camera and they were hiding in their makeshift hut, and they seemed to have been communicating with something in the woods that was legitimately trying to talk back to them.
Yeah,
and
but it was like
it sounds a lot like the Bigfoot calls that you hear Bigfoot hunters claim that they would hear, and they mimic, but in a way that was trying to be a language.
Yeah, they said they would talk over each other. These noises. So they knew there was more than there was a group of them because they would talk over each other. The hunters would mimic the sounds or the words that was being said, and then they would mimic it back. But sometimes they would come into their camp, and they said it would sound like they were just trashing the camp, that the pots and pans were flying around, that they were literally in fear for their life, that at any moment this was going to open the door and tear them to shreds. But they would walk out the next day and there was nothing disturbed.
Yep.
David Paulides stayed there for what do you say?
He said he was
7
there
days?
for like 10 nights.
Yeah, waiting to
He
see if
was
he could
there
hear
for
it.
like 10 nights and he never saw anything weird. Yeah.
But they sent the recordings to different scientists to get their opinions, and every scientist said that it was non-human, that it did have vocal cords, that it had a higher range and a lower range than a human can make, and that the size of the body would have had to have been somewhere between 7 and 10 or 11 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And that one scared the bejesus out of me.
Right.
The fact that they kept going back, and they asked him, why do you keep coming back? And he goes, because there's something out there. And I'm like, that would be my exact reason if somebody said, why didn't you ever go back? Because there's something out there. In fact, I think that whole section starts off with him saying, titled like something like "Because There's Something Out There." So we still do not know where it is. They will not disclose the location, and they said that they won't now because they know that people will go out there and try to hunt whatever it is, and it never hurt them. It just tried to communicate with them or frighten them. Maybe they didn't know. But it didn't work. Frightening them didn't work. And anything else you want to say about that one?
Just that it was an interesting story about. The thing that was cool about it was the missing people were all in the same area, and this is the same area that this secret group of hunters has seen all these weird things, and they live in these woods basically. Like,
Yeah.
they spend so much of their time there. There's nobody more qualified on earth to talk about these woods and that area in general than these hunters. And so if they're saying, if these are people who have like city jobs in their town, or like these are citizens who just like want to camp and hunt, and they don't get anything from talking about what goes on in the woods because it's a secret spot to begin with.
Yes. And
So
they
for
said,
them to be like,
we don't want to tell anybody because they'll think we're crazy.
yeah. So for them to go ahead and be like, you know what, like, we're gonna talk about this because this could potentially help out with these missing people, and you don't even have to look at those woods all around the world, forests all around the world, all of them seem to just have weird stories about them.
A comment was left to my channel yesterday that said something about, I think it was Ian Payne who left it, who said something about the woods. Stories are often written about the woods, and especially in German folklore, with Robin Hood, not Robin Hood, Little Red Riding Hood, etc. The scary things, Hansel and Gretel, happen in the woods, and there must be that everybody feels that kind of a feeling when you are in the woods, that you are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this last one I want to talk about really quickly is also not a missing person one, but it's interesting because Bruce Maccabee, some of you might know who he is because he's very, very famous, and this is why he's famous. He is an optical physicist who was formerly employed by the Navy in charge of investigations into UFOs. He is the leading ufologist in the world. Very well known. You guys have probably seen, he has written books after book after book. You've probably seen documentaries that if they don't have him in there, they quote him. Well, his wife's name is Jan Maccabee, and Jan, they live on property, they own their own property, and she went out hunting one day by herself. She climbed into a tree, and that she used as a deer stand, but it was a tree. And she said that her husband, being who he is, she always takes along a camera. She had a phone that could take pictures because he's always told her, if you ever see something weird, take a picture of it. So she's trying to do that. Now, this woman is, I would say, late 60s, do you think?
Yeah, about close to that.
So she climbs up in her thing and she says that she has suddenly I have 17%, the strangest, worst feeling come over her. Like something is wrong. Something is watching her. And whatever it is, doesn't have good intentions. And her instincts are to stand there, stay up in the tree, and be quiet. And suddenly, she sees across from her in the trees what she describes as looking exactly like the predator when we can't see the predator. When it's like pixelated movement, that he blends in with the trees. And they reenacted on the documentary. So the documentary is on Amazon Prime. If you guys want to see this, it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And you can also hear, by the way, the sounds of what could be Bigfoot. They show you what it sounds like. But she sees this strange thing in the tree, and she sees it take an arm out or whatever and move from one tree to the next. Now, somebody had left a post on a message on my videos the other day of saying it was about child medicine, saying it's the predator. You'll know he's there when you hear his clicking. And other people were like, "What are you talking about? What does that mean?" And I said, "Stay tuned, because I got to tell you what that's talking about, what that is referring to." So she sees it move. She has this. I don't know what she said. This something happens to her, like she's losing time. She takes her phone out. It's a flip phone. She takes pictures of it because she's been trained by Bruce Maccabee. Takes pictures of it, and she hides. Right, Jor?
Yeah, well, she didn't really have to hide because she was up in the deer blind.
Yeah, but I mean, she never she doesn't get
So
down like right away. She just
no,
stays there like frozen.
she just kind of like sits there frozen and watches this thing, and it was only a matter of seconds. Like it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't something that happened over a period of 30 minutes. Like she
Yeah.
spotted this whatever it is, pull out her phone, took a picture of it as it was kind of like traveling, I guess would be the word, in between
Yeah.
trees. Yeah. And it didn't
Yeah.
seem to notice her. It just kind of was doing its thing.
And at the exact same time, her nephew, the next day, her nephew calls Bruce because Bruce is a ufologist and tells him that during the football game, they were doing band practice. During
Mm-hmm.
band practice, this object floats over the field, stays there, hovering over them. They all stop. Everybody in the band, including the band director, and they like look up at this thing that's just sitting there. Is there something vibrating?
That would be my dog snoring.
Oh, real cute. Okay, so it's just hovering over there, and so he calls, his great uncle to tell him because he's like, "Oh my God, hello! I saw a UFO. We saw a UFO. You know, everybody was there. They can tell you. The band director was there. They can tell you." and it was the exact time that Jan was experiencing this alien-like experience in the woods, and we don't really think that that's coincidental. But I love that they added that story because that was so creepy. Don't go in the woods. Just don't. I just don't go in the woods. That's my advice. What do you think about that? I have 16%.
What did I think of her story?
Yeah, what did you think of her story?
Well, it was interesting. It's hard because I'm still one of the I'm still on the fence on what to believe, what not to believe when it comes to alien life forms and UFOs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying she didn't see this because, that's her experience. So it's interesting, and people see so many different weird things in the woods, and I'm sure you've seen it, but there's like such a big uptick in people seeing wendigos and skinwalkers in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like, these disappearances in general, and it's not just these hunters, it's people in general. A lot of these people who disappear tend to be people who know the area well, or just are
Yeah.
outdoorsy people in general.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, you can attribute probably some of it to just freak accidents, but then, let's go back to the story of the Crazies, um, and the guy up in the Crazies. Like, to me, it's just like, how do you explain that? How do you explain a dude who knows
Yeah.
an area so well dying 11 miles away from the camp
Yeah.
that he knew too well? He knew it too well
Yes.
for him to die 11 miles away from where he was supposed to be.
Yep.
And you can't even call it suicide. If you wanted to kill yourself, there's plenty of ways to just kill yourself and be done with it. If this was truly a suicide attempt, he
Right.
chose the most prolonged, painful way to do it. It doesn't
Yes.
make sense. It
And
doesn't make
it
sense.
was only made possible by the fact that there was an accident to start off with. So it couldn't have even been, I mean, it wasn't even planned.
So there's something that's going on in a lot of these cases, and it's just hard to say what. And who knows, maybe it is this thing that this lady saw in the woods that just kind of, but it didn't even notice her, or it didn't, and if it did, it didn't interact with her. It just kind
No,
of
I
did its
didn't.
own thing.
But I want to say something about that. The picture she took, she gave to Bruce Maccabee, who, like I said, is an optical physicist. He said that, the pictures turned out blurry. The pictures beforehand, because she was out there taking selfies, because that's what we do. She was out there taking selfies in her deer blind. And then the pictures she took of this were blurry. But not only were they blurry, they were turned to a pixelation that doesn't even exist. That he could go in and change the pixels easily on anything, on a camera of anything, of any way. But this is a pixelation, that formation that doesn't exist. Yet there it is on her camera phone. And she didn't take it with her camera because she needed to take it right now, and she had her phone in her hand. But that's also an interesting fact, that scientifically speaking, he was like, there's no explanation for this.
Mm-hmm.
So, who knows what it is? I think there's a lot of different things. I also lean towards serial killers, but I think that there's a lot of things that when the government shows up, when the FBI shows up, when they shouldn't be there, that's a red flag to me. And especially like, Tom and his neighbor, within a 10-mile radius, something happens to two men, the same description, and the FBI just happens to be there, and we'll just go over to this one now. Some of these are just kind of unexplainable. Or you get out of your vehicle, there's so much fog you can't see, but you don't turn around. I don't know. Some things, I agree. Some things are people who just want to go and get lost. I don't think that's what happened to Adam.
Well, it's kind of like the suicide forest in Japan. Like,
mm-hmm.
what
Or
is it
Aaron. His
about?
name was Aaron. Sorry.
What is it about that particular forest that people are just
Yeah.
drawn to going into and ending their life?
Yeah.
So it just feels like, and like you said, there's so many different things we can look at. My wife even said, well, probably just serial killers. Okay, so maybe 1 out of 100 cases, maybe. Like, we can't just think to ourselves,
Yeah.
oh, serial killers are just all laying out in the woods, hopefully waiting for
Waiting.
someone to separate from their friend next to jagged rocks in a lake and it snows, right?
Hopefully somebody will come out here and I can kill them. Yes, exactly.
Ted
That's
Bundy's
true.
just like, man, I really hope it rains next to these jagged rocks in this lake, and some hopeless 62-year-old outdoorsman hunter with a shotgun wanders by, and I can kill them with no trace of their body.
No blood. No scuffles. No scuff marks. They just pick them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're you're right about that. That's true.
So,
It
but
is.
at the
It
same
is like,
time, it's possible. I
well,
mean,
I think
for
that a whole bunch
some
of things are possible.
situations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do think it's possible that some situations could be serial killers. But the thing is that it's really you have to take advantage of a situation that you don't even know is going to happen if you're a serial killer.
Yeah.
These are accidental things that are happening. A child walks away from his family. That's not something that was planned or something that person did. Um, the fact that when people get put back exactly where they were, where people were standing 3 feet from each other, poking sticks into whatever, and all of a sudden, a year later, there's a body placed on the trail. Those are the ones I think might have been a serial killer.
Yeah.
And then they just bring the body back because, I mean, the searchers are called off within days.
Yeah.
So, but other things, they're more unexplainable, the irrational choices, and yeah, I don't know. But anyway, I better go before this dies. Jory, thank you for doing this with me, and we have talked about doing another one for the 31 Days of Halloween, which I would like to do, which would be about skinwalkers. And I appreciate you. I miss you coming here.
Well, thanks for having me on. Working and being a dad takes up a lot of time, so
Yeah.
don't have the same free time I used to have. As a matter of fact, this is way past my bedtime, so.
Yes, it is. So I will let you go, and thank you. And by the way, you guys, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Please like this video. Please share this video. Please click if you would like to be notified when my content goes live. Please leave comments. Let me know what you think. And if you want to send something in for the 31 Days of Halloween, go ahead and let me know below. I'll give you an email to send it to, and you will be given credit. Good night.
Good night.